Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. We sit here and say, God loves you infinitely, beyond measure, knows your name and your magnificence, made in the image of love, and you look back and say, what are the rules? And that's called the puzzle. The review is simple. Up to this point, we've talked to you about this puzzle. That humanity knows there's an afterlife, even through statistics of interviews. I said more than 80% of the planet believes in the afterlife, which says they understand there's more. And in the understanding that there's more, they have to then go to and are attracted to the teaching about what that might be. And therefore, most of the planet has some kind of belief systems. The puzzle is often satisfied with minutia and linearity. Here is God, here are the rules, here's what to do. Here's how you speak to God, whether perhaps it's through prayer or through prayer and through an interloper who will speak for you. Here's what you do if you make a mistake. You've got to then correct the mistake, and so on and so forth. And it satisfies in a lower energy the puzzle. That regular human beings, not those necessarily in this room, but regular human beings are starting to ask the question, is there more than I was told? With the idea that there is, and that many are going to that place and asking that question. But those who ask the question and are presented with answers are opening a door to another paradigm. And sometimes that's not comfortable. In fact, many times that's not comfortable. Because you have a linear parachute that you're not aware of. Here's how it goes. On your own, you have the idea in this new energy that there's more than you were told, and you start opening the door and examining that. Some would come to groups like this and study it. But almost all of the channels have told you the same thing, and that is, you must do this by yourself. Now, by yourself means that free choice of your consciousness is involved to put you through that new door of explanation, of examination, of new energy, of new paradigms. And once you get there, we've also told you that you're not alone. But it looks like you are. The parachute has always become the rules. The doctrine, the prophets, the books, they're all there for you to study, to find out what happens next, what do you do if. And yet when you walk through that door, it's like you step off into nothing. Dear ones, I know that. We all know that. All of the channels sitting in the chair before you know that. And that's what has all been about. What do you do next? What do you verbalize? How do you handle it? How do you change paradigms? What do you do? So we continue that. I would like to tell you how much we understand from our perspective on this side of the veil, what that might be like. Because we've watched it. What happens to a human being who steps out of the paradigm of being a human being? In your history, it's so interesting to watch what has happened as a metaphor. As soon as you received powered flight, that wasn't that long ago. As soon as you had airplanes of any kind, of any nature, no matter how big or small or how frail or strong, there were those who would fly them who had the idea that said there has to be a way to escape if we need to. And that became the parachute. Now, in the early days, it was a complete mystery. You didn't have flight. Oh, you had high places like mountains, but not a straight down situation of thousands of feet. And so the experiments had never been tried how to escape from heights like that. Can you imagine what they went through in the testing? Throwing out big bags, heavy, connected to cloth, and all of these things, and many strings, in order to find out which ones would make it and which ones wouldn't. And how would you determine when a human being hits the ground at a certain speed, will it be all right or not? How big does the cloth have to be? And how will you arrange it so that it will open correctly? Because it can't open in the airplane. It's got to open with the wind somehow. And what happens if it doesn't open? Trial after trial after trial, and human beings throwing out bags and dummies and all of these things to find these things out. And finally they hone it to an idea: this is going to work almost every single time it opens. But then there is that almost. There had to be a human being, dear ones, who did it first, who jumped out of an airplane with that cloth and those strings. What'd that feel like? Would you make it or not? Would your descent be too fast or not? Would there be wind or not? Would you land in a tree? What would happen? That feeling at that moment is how so many light workers feel when they step into the precipice of light. And there's no parachute, or at least not that they can see, and there's no rules. There's no prophet to save them in case they fail. And all they have is the knowledge that they have a loving God with a paradigm that has been so different than anything they've ever been taught. And we told you not to worry about the minutia. And I'm going to talk about that. So that human being, that courageous human being, steps off the airplane, and lo and behold, that which they have tested and experimented with works. They hit the ground a little too hard. The next one will have more cloth, more strings, and you have the evolvement of the parachute. It even evolved to the fact that they knew they needed two in case the first one failed. And that became the spare. But that was all part of the inventions of the day. But still, today, there are those who have to step off for the first time, who've never done it. Same feeling. What I want to tell you that's interesting, and that is also a metaphor, is that parachutes were the same for decades and decades and decades and decades, until just recently, when someone came along and said, you know, what you're doing is falling through air, hoping things will open. What if instead you designed it like a wing? What if you used the air in a way that you understand, because you understand flight? What if you could pull on the strings in a certain way and make this not a parachute but a glider of sorts? And it worked. Now there are those who are interested not even in jumping out of airplanes, but jumping off of mountaintops. Now you have those who can glide, who can even take advantage of the currents, actually lift and stay for hours. There are those who can land on a dime, as they say. They know exactly where they're going. They're using what they cannot see, the air, as a tool. And now they're gliding. That paradigm, which was so frightening to them, which they hoped would work, and they hoped they would not land in a tree, and they hoped the chute would open, has now been refined so they are in control of invisible things called the air. You see where I'm going. You see what I'm saying. It took time. It took experimenting. It took courage. But that's where the paradigm that we're speaking of, that you step into, is a little different than the metaphor we're giving you, because as soon as you step into that area, I would like to tell you, all that these channels have been talking about starts to come into play. Number one, God knows you open the door. Spirit, the Creator, knows you open the door. Now that's a tough call, because when you open it, you don't see it. You don't have the parachute of the doctrine or the words. All you have is seemingly empty space. And this is where it gets good. Because while you learn, we hold you up. And when you're afraid, we hold you up. And then the experimenting begins when you learn to fly. And the learning to fly is a word that means you start to understand that energy, which seems to be odd because there seems to be no support of doctrines and prophets and rules. But you also realize something else. You look backwards, and we've talked about that before. Looking down into old consciousness is easy. Looking up into a consciousness you've never experienced is not possible. But here you are, above all things, going through that door and experimenting with that which is invisible and finding the cords to pull and the tools to use. Healer, are you listening? To create something you didn't expect. And suddenly you look backwards and realize humanity has actually humanized God. God becomes the angry father, the one you have to please or you have punishment. And you realize how foolish and silly and what a children's version you have come from. And when you start to look up, all you see is love. That's what I want to talk about. When God says to you, I love you beyond measure, what's your response? Is your response to say, well, qualify that, please? Or will you take it at face value that there is a loving Creator that's going to work with you? There are so many things I could tell you right now about this issue, working with you. There are so many who said, well, I stepped out into that precipice. I'm having trouble with it. Dear ones, I would like to explain this generation of old souls and light workers. You are in a transition between bodies which have been literally programmed for decades to be a certain way, and suddenly you're in a place where you're starting to talk to them and they've never heard you before. Where you're trying to heal yourself on a daily basis and working with the affirmations with bodies that for generations of humanity and instinct past have never heard you before. It's almost like there's a programming and a patterning inside most of you that won't respond instantly. I have not really said that in these ways before. The body wants to listen. And that's why we say, you better do this daily. Because it's not used to it. And some of you will get partial results and not full results. And that's why. It's hard to take corporeal history of decades in an old energy and instantly change it. But consciousness is still the answer, and it will respond. The reason is because it's constantly rejuvenating. And so as the new cells rejuvenate and come online, they start to hear you speaking. How long does it take for a human to rejuvenate everything, including skin and all? It may take longer than you think. And even they have to be trained. This is different. You are on the cusp of new things. But I'll tell you this, that when you come back, and you are coming back, this is going to be ingrained in you. You will start this as soon as you awaken and know to do it. And that's the difference between the old soul of today and the new one that you will become. The practice you are doing now, the work that you are doing now is ingrained in your very Akashic record. And when you awaken next time, an evolvement takes place where you're going to remember it and continuing it. Where you'll not make the same mistakes again, and for you awaken new and fresh, ready to go and live a lot longer than you will now. That's part of breaking through that old into that new. Kryon, I'm still having trouble. Yes, you are. I know that. It's hard to leap out of that airplane. It really is. And so there'll be partial leaps. And what I mean by that is you'll cling to the old and try the new. We see that. We understand that. There's no right or wrong in the way you decide how much courage you might have and how far you want to go and whether you really want to let go or not. And that is who you are because you're absolutely unique. But I'm going to tell you this. It's a promise. For those of you who want to take the story I gave you early on, a parable called The Missing Bridge. If you want to take that to heart, you'll understand that the leaping is the best thing you can do all at once. And that is where you say to yourself, all that I may have ever learned or understand about anything on this planet, I will suspend. Anything. What my parents said, what my pastor said, my priest said, my rabbi said, any of these, I'm going to suspend it all. I can go back to it if I wish, but right now, I'm suspending it. And I'm saying, dear Spirit, is it true? Is there more? And I want to tell you, if you are courageous to do that and raise your hand, it's like an antenna. It's an antenna, and that antenna is not going to be struck by lightning. What's going to happen is that hand, which becomes an antenna, is going to have another hand which takes it and starts to pull you out of the mire of an old energy of worry and victimization and dishealth, and start slowly pulling you into an area you don't understand, but that hand is going to hold you while you get used to it. A paradigm you don't know about, seemingly like thin air. And that hand is going to hold you until some time, like the bird throwing the kids out of the nest, where you'll fly by yourself. And that is when miracles start to happen. Are you able right now to say, I've got a problem I know about in the future. Something's there. I know it's going to have to be solved somehow. And I wring my hands at night and I think about it and I'm anxious and it really changes how I sleep or how I eat. Every single one, perhaps listening or in the room, has experienced that or maybe is right now. Anxiety about the future. Let me ask you, what if, right now, you could say, I'm not going to worry about it because, you see, it's going to solve itself. That's the story of the missing bridge. You might want to go and read it. Or listen to it. It's available. And that is the one that suspends all of the worry about the future because they count on a solution that they don't understand and can't figure out for themselves happening in a time they don't understand either. And that's why when you tell somebody what you believe, and they are linear, somebody you meet on the street, well, how do you work your life? Well, I don't worry about it because it takes care of itself. And they label you right away as the ones that wear the little tinfoil hats and believe in spaceships above you. And they walk away. And again, another channel. They're too smart to look. They know better. In linearity, they know better. And if they stay in linearity, they're right. But if there's more to it than that, that's what you discovered. There is. So what's this channel really about? Again, we love you. That's what the channel's about. What could you say about this eternal God that you believe in? Or about the puzzle of there must be something different and something more than just what you see? And if you could say, what is it that you know about? That's interestingly, almost every organized religion on the planet also agrees with you about. What is it? What's the common denominator of everything that everyone speaks of? And the answer is the incredible love of God. It mends doctrines that then take it to other places, but I'm talking about the core. Interesting, is it not, that the first organized religion on the planet had no prophet at all? The Hindu? Oneness with all. Oneness. Probably as close to the truth. And then from then on, humans did what they did. And I've told you, and you know. But the love is what is the common denominator. Something that cannot be explained. And so that's why I encourage you to take the leap of faith. In any way that you wish, in any stage that you wish, that's comfortable for you. Open the door slowly if you wish. All at once if you wish. But know this, there really is something more than you've been told. There really is. And humanity is discovering it slowly. You're starting to see it. One of the largest religions of the planet has its churches now starting to become darker. Closing the doors, they become museums. No one's going anymore. Things are starting to happen that were never expected as humans start to turn away from the linear punishment idea and go to that which is only pure love. And they look for where to go and what to do. And I hope you've tuned into this channel, dear ones, where I can say all you have to do is to understand there's more and understand that God knows your name. We're going to close now. And I'm going to ask you to repeat something. I seldom do this. Repeat, God knows my name.
God knows my name.
What does that mean to you? What could it? Now, I told you I would get back to this. All the entities in the shadow of the mountain know your name. Anyone who's watching right now in this meeting knows your name. That is significant into what's next. And that is the invisible precipice that is the support and the parachute for the old soul and the light worker who wishes to go to the next step. And so it is.